I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. At today's House Energy Committee hearing, Republican lawmaker Brett Guthrie questions HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra on border policy and COVID-19 test shortages. The ranking member from Kentucky presses Becerra on the potential results of rescinding Title 42. He also questions Becerra on the COVID-19 test shortage problems in May, asking why the Biden administration didn't see the Delta wave coming. Let's listen in.
To question for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Welcome back to the House, Mr. Secretary. Glad to have you here today. I toured the border early in the year with Dr. Burgess, and the border was overwhelmed. My focus was for this subject of this committee was the illicit fentanyl coming across the border. And when we were talking to the Border Patrol, and Dr. Burgess asked the question, and they said that what if we repealed Title 42, revoked it? And he said it would go from a crisis to a catastrophe. And so the concern is when CDC, HHS recommended, I know it's tied up in court now, but did recommend removing this May 23rd. Did you consider the flow of illicit fentanyl coming to the country and what countermeasures you know this would create another opportunity for it to come forward? What was the concern when you made that decision about fentanyl? 70% of Kentuckians who died of overdose died of illicit fentanyl. I think that's typical for most of our states. So in revoking the decision to revoke Title 42, what factors did you put into place for fentanyl or other drugs coming across our border?
Congressman, first, I think we all recognize that we need to do everything when it comes to drug enforcement policy to make sure we interdict drugs that are trying to come into the country. But you're confusing health policy with migration and drug interdiction policy because Title 42 would impact those immigrants who are actually crossing the border and not trying to clandestinely enter. They're trying to seek asylum. So when they come in, they present themselves. Therefore, if they were carrying fentanyl, we'd be able to discover.
So we asked that question though of the Border Patrol, and what they said was anything that doesn't discourage people from coming, the volume continues to increase. And therefore, matter of fact, we went through one of the processing centers, and they said, look at every person in here with a badge, every person in here with a uniform, and that's somebody that should be on the border. So understand Title 42, I'm not confusing it. But I do know that it is a deterrent, that if you're going to remove that deterrent, I know HHS has a different focus than Homeland Security, but surely the administration has some kind of plan in place to try to interdict this illicit fentanyl that is flowing across the border.
And again, Title 42 speaks to health conditions in the country. And what you're speaking to are either migration challenges or drug interdiction challenges. And
right,
so,
but it's still a country challenge. I understand.
That's correct, but you would use migration laws or drug interdiction laws to try to deal with those challenges, not healthcare laws.
So on the illicit fentanyl, currently it's temporarily scheduled. Do you think it should be permanently scheduled, illicit fentanyl, and subject to mandatory minimums?
On fentanyl, what I can tell you is that the FDA and the different agencies within HHS will be reviewing how we treat, whether it's fentanyl or any other drug, whether we put it on any formularies.
Okay, but you're not going to take a position whether it should be scheduled?
I wouldn't want to get ahead of the agencies that actually do this through the science.
All right, and so we talked a little yesterday. I remember last Thanksgiving trying to go around town in Bowling Green, Kentucky, trying to find tests for my kids thought that they might have brought COVID into our, not fentanyl, thank goodness, COVID into
Hopefully they didn't find that.
Our community, and you know, and there was just a shortage. Kentucky had to ration monoclonal antibodies for Delta, and the vice president said, we didn't see Delta coming. I think most scientists did not, upon whose advice and direction we have relief, didn't see Delta coming. And every time we had Dr. Fauci, we said, we're going to get out of masks, we're going to do this. He goes, well, we don't know if a wave's coming. It seems like we didn't know a wave. We expected a wave to come and weren't prepared for it. Could you talk about why we didn't have, we're talking about if you remember all the press conferences in April and May of 2020 when the previous administration was there, everybody was testing, all the other things, and within 3 months, you know, we're a year and a half into it and we weren't ready for a wave.
Congressman, thanks for the question. And as we discussed previously, we had millions of tests available. What happened is that Americans started to demand the at-home tests. The tests that we had available were the tests that would take a week or two to get results because they go into laboratories to give you the results. People wanted immediate results because they wanted to know if they could go visit their grandmother.
Exactly.
So what we did was we really ramped up the availability of those instantaneous at-home tests, which unfortunately are less reliable than the PCR test.
Why weren't we ready in November of 2021?
I'm sorry, where?
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and the president set up the program where people can order these tests.
Yeah.
But why weren't we ready in November of 2021? We
Well,
didn't know it
again-
was going to come that month, but we knew a wave was coming, and we just didn't have the at-home tests.
Well, remember, we had hundreds of millions of tests available for Americans as of the summer. In fact, we had no tests available for the American public a year ago, or about February, March of last year. So we ramped up dramatically, but the shift came when people wanted to be able to take the test solely at home. Very convenient.
And then we didn't
less
have enough
reliable.
antibodies either. I know my time's expired, but thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here.
Gentleman yields back. Chair is pleased to recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Pallone, to question for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Eshoo, and thank you, Secretary Becerra, for your